In 2006, Nokia was not struggling. It was dominant. Over 40% of the world's mobile phones were Nokia devices. In some markets, the number was even higher. They weren't guessing. They weren't improvising. They had data. They had experience. They had scale. And most importantly, they had profit. Nokia wasn't afraid of innovation. They were afraid of losing what already worked. Inside the company, the threat was not invisible. Engineers knew touchscreens were coming. Executives knew Apple was working on something. The problem was not ignorance. The problem was incentives. Nokia's entire business was optimized around one idea: sell as many phones as possible, as efficiently as possible. Symbian was not elegant, but it was reliable. It ran on millions of devices. It supported dozens of models. It protected margins. Changing that system meant risk. And risk meant disrupting a machine that was still printing money. So the question wasn't, is a touchscreen phone the future? The question was, is it worth risking what we already dominate? That question came up again and again in meetings. Not in dramatic confrontations. Not in emotional debates. In calm rooms. With spreadsheets. The answer kept leaning the same way. Not now. Then, in January 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage. He didn't talk about market share. He didn't talk about carrier partnerships. He held a device in his hand. A phone with no physical keyboard. A large touchscreen. Software that felt nothing like Symbian. The iPhone wasn't perfect. It was expensive. It lacked features Nokia phones already had. But it reframed the entire category. This wasn't a better phone. It was a different idea of what a phone was. Inside Nokia, this moment was watched carefully. And then discussed. Engineers raised concerns. Some managers saw the shift. But the dominant interpretation was not panic. It was caution. The iPhone was seen as a niche product, a device for a different audience, something that might sell, but not scale. More importantly, it didn't fit Nokia's model. Touchscreens meant fewer variants. Fewer models meant less reach. A new operating system meant rewriting everything. And rewriting everything meant slowing down. Slowing down was unacceptable. Nokia's strength had always been speed and breadth. They could launch dozens of phones per year, for every price point, for every region. The iPhone didn't play that game. So Nokia made a decision. Not loudly, not dramatically. They stayed the course. Symbian would continue. Touch would be added later, incrementally, safely. At the time, this decision made sense. It protected revenue. It avoided internal chaos. It reassured partners. No one was fired for this choice. No emergency meetings followed. Because nothing broke immediately. That's what makes this decision dangerous. It didn't fail fast. It failed slowly. Over the next few years, the market shifted. Developers moved toward platforms with better tools. Users expected smoother interfaces. Touchscreens stopped being optional. Nokia responded, but every response was constrained by the past. Symbian had to remain compatible. Existing products had to be supported. Margins had to be protected. Each adjustment made the system heavier. Slower. More complex. By the time Nokia realized they were no longer leading, they were reacting. And reaction is always late. In 2010, their market share began collapsing. Not because they didn't try, but because their earlier decision had locked them in. They had optimized for a world that no longer existed. The most uncomfortable part of this story is that the decision wasn't irrational. It was logical. Nokia didn't ignore the future. They postponed it. And postponement feels safe. That's why this story feels familiar. Because this decision doesn't belong to Nokia alone. It happens in companies everywhere. A new idea appears. It threatens existing success. Data is mixed. Risk is real. And the safest option is to wait. To improve what already works. To delay disruption. To say, not yet. The problem is that markets don't wait. And disruption doesn't announce itself politely. By the time change becomes obvious, it's no longer optional. Nokia didn't lose because they lacked talent. They lost because their system rewarded stability over reinvention. The decision that sealed their fate was not a single mistake. It was a pattern of choosing certainty today over uncertainty tomorrow. That's why this decision feels so familiar, because many organizations face the same moment. Not on a global stage, not with headlines, but in small rooms, with quiet meetings and reasonable arguments. And when the decision is made, it rarely feels like a mistake. It feels responsible until years later, when the cost finally becomes visible. By then, the moment to choose differently is gone.